The Veltrax Coalition was one of the oldest powers in the galaxy. They were proud. They believed they were smarter than everyone else. For many years, they ruled large parts of space with fear and control. Most other alien groups followed their orders because they did not want trouble. The Veltrax made rules, and if anyone disobeyed, they punished them without warning. The Veltrax had a new plan. They wanted to test humans, not in a normal way, not with questions or simple tasks. They wanted to prove that humans were weak. They wanted the galaxy to see that humans did not belong among stronger races. So they built something. It was a secret. Only a few leaders knew about it. They called it the Deep Core Simulation Chamber. This chamber looked like a tall, smooth pod. It was made from black metal. On the outside, it seemed quiet, but inside it was filled with strange lights, strong pulses, and dangerous mind programs. These programs could send images directly into the brain. They could make the person inside see their worst fears. They could create pain, confusion, sadness, and anger. It was not a test. It was a trap. It was built to break whoever went in. The Veltrax said it was part of a training exchange. They said it was safe, but they lied. The chamber was not used on their own people. It was only for outsiders. And now they had chosen a human. A young human cadet named Lena Rowe. She had been sent to learn with the Veltrax as part of a peace agreement. Earth had trusted them. Earth had no idea what they planned. Lena was small. She didn't talk much. She always listened and followed orders. She was just a trainee learning how other species lived. She had no weapons. She had no armor. She had never even flown a real mission. That's why they picked her. They thought she was weak. They thought no one would notice if she failed. They told her it was just a normal simulation test, something every student did. Lena agreed. She stepped into the chamber alone. The door closed behind her. The room went dark, and then it began. First came the noise, a loud, sharp ringing in her ears. It felt like a storm inside her head. Then came the lights flashing red, blue, and green, all too fast to follow. Then came the visions, her friends screaming, fire all around, floating through space with no air, people she loved calling her name, begging for help. Over and over the chamber sent new images. Some were sad, some were scary, some were just strange and confusing. The chamber also made her body feel heavy, like gravity had doubled. It changed the air. Sometimes it got too hot. Sometimes it froze her skin. The ground seemed to move under her feet like waves. The computer inside the chamber was learning from her reactions. If she tried to focus, it sent louder sounds. If she closed her eyes, it made the images stronger. It wanted to break her will. It wanted her to give up. Most beings could not last more than 1 minute. A few lasted 3. The Veltrax never told anyone what happened to the ones who failed. They just disappeared. There were no records, no goodbyes, just silence. But Lena did not stop. She stood straight even when her legs shook. She kept breathing even when the air turned thin. She whispered something to herself, something only she could hear. The computer didn't know what she said. It tried harder. The lights became brighter. The screams got louder. A wall of fire rose in front of her, and then it all turned into cold darkness. Lena moved forward, slowly, one step at a time. She reached out and touched the side of the chamber. The surface felt smooth and warm. Then she closed her eyes, and that's when something strange happened. The chamber's control lights flickered. The programs inside slowed down. Data started to break apart. The system didn't understand what was going on. The chamber had been made to control the brain, but it had never met a human like her. It had never tested someone who didn't panic, someone who didn't scream, someone who refused to believe what they saw. Lena's mind did something new. She didn't just survive, she pushed back. Her thoughts became sharp like a sword. Her memories became armor. And inside that strange machine, she didn't fall, she fought. Outside, the Veltrax watched from a control room. They were confused, then worried, then silent. They expected Lena to break in seconds, but minutes passed, 2, then 3, then 5. Her heart was steady. Her breathing was calm. One of the Veltrax officers checked the data. It was impossible. She wasn't just inside the test. She was moving through it, solving it, changing it. By minute 6, she had found the core of the simulation. It looked like a wall of numbers and moving shapes. She focused on them. In her mind, she moved the shapes, changed the patterns. The system blinked again. The floor stopped shaking. The lights dimmed. The computer voice inside the chamber tried to stop her. It said, "Warning, unstable input detected." But she didn't stop. At exactly 7 minutes, the chamber made a loud pop, then silence. The door opened. Lena stepped out. Her eyes were calm, her hands were steady. She looked around the room but said nothing. The Veltrax guards stared at her. None of them moved. For the first time, they didn't know what to do. One of the commanders tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He had watched hundreds of species fail. But this human had finished the test, not broken, not afraid. Later, some would say the simulation had malfunctioned. Some would say it wasn't real. But everyone saw the footage. Everyone heard the alarms. And everyone watched her walk out, not crawling, not crying, but standing tall. The Veltrax never expected anyone to finish the test. They never planned for someone to win. Now they had a problem, because Lena didn't just survive. She beat it. And she was just a cadet, just a trainee. Back on Earth, the signal came in. A copy of the full chamber recording. It arrived at a quiet command station. At first, no one understood what it was. Then they watched. They saw the images, the data, and the ending. Officers stood up from their chairs. Leaders called emergency meetings. The chamber was illegal. The test was a trick. And one of their own had been used without warning. Earth had trusted the Veltrax, but now that trust was broken. The galaxy was watching. Some were shocked. Some were scared. Some stayed silent. But everyone knew one thing now. Humans were not as weak as they seemed. If a young cadet could beat a mind weapon in 7 minutes, what could the rest of them do? The Veltrax had made a big mistake. They wanted to embarrass Earth. Instead, they gave the galaxy a reason to respect it or fear it. And Earth was no longer silent. Earth was listening. Earth was planning. Lena Rowe was not famous. Most people on Earth didn't even know her name. She wasn't a hero, a commander, or a leader. She was a student, a cadet, a quiet girl who liked to read in corners and watch the stars. But even if most of the galaxy didn't know who she was, there were still people who cared. People who loved her. People who would not stay quiet after what happened to her. The first person to speak was her uncle, Dr. Elias Rowe. He was not a soldier. He didn't carry weapons, but he was one of Earth's smartest minds. He helped design defense shields that now protected entire cities. He worked on communication systems that allowed ships to talk across light years. When Elias saw the footage of Lena in the simulation chamber, he sat down and stared at the screen for hours. Then, without saying a word, he packed a small bag, left his lab, and disappeared from Earth's radar. No one knew where he went, but a week later one of the Veltrax listening stations stopped working. No explosions, no damage, just silence. Then another, then a third. All of them had used technology based on Dr. Rowe's designs. Technology he had once shared freely, hopping for peace. Now he was taking it back. Slowly, quietly. Lena's best friend, Lin, was another person who wouldn't stay quiet. Me wasn't strong or tall, but she was fast with her hands and even faster with her thoughts. She could build drones from spare parts and fix any broken machine. She and Lena grew up on the same space station, learning how to work with tools before they could spell long words. When Me heard about what happened, she broke her keyboard in anger. Then she built something new. No one saw her leave the station. She slipped out during the night, flying in a small ship that didn't even have a name. 2 weeks later, the Veltrax trading systems glitched. Cargo ships arrived in the wrong places. Orders disappeared. Money was lost. Someone was playing inside their system, moving things around. It wasn't random. It was a message. And Lin never sent a single word. Another person who cared about Lena was her old teacher, Captain Raina Holt. She was strong, quiet, and serious. She trained new cadets in space survival, hand-to-hand fighting, and teamwork. She didn't smile much, but everyone knew she cared deeply about her students. Lena had once failed one of her tests, but instead of yelling, Raina trained with her every night until she passed. When Captain Holt saw the recording of Lena inside the chamber, she stood frozen. Not because she was scared, but because she was thinking. She knew what that test was. She had heard stories, dark rumors about what the Veltrax did in secret. Now it wasn't a rumor. It was real. She asked to speak to her superiors. When they refused, she left her post. She went to a small moon on the edge of known space, a moon with an old, hidden base. It wasn't used anymore, or so people thought. But then lights turned on, fuel arrived, and the training ground came back to life. Raina didn't plan a war. She planned readiness. If others came for humans again, they would be ready. But that wasn't all. On Earth, news spread slowly at first. The government didn't want panic. They didn't want fear, but people talk, and someone shared the video. One day it was just a secret file. The next day it was being watched across every human colony. People saw Lena's face. They saw the pain, the fear, the strength, and they remembered what it meant to be human. Lena's mother, Talia Rowe, had stayed silent in public. She didn't go on the news. She didn't give interviews. But she wrote a short letter and sent it across the network. My daughter was not a soldier. She was not trained to fight monsters. She was a student, a kind soul. She believed in learning and peace. You tried to break her, but you failed. She stood tall, and now the world sees who you really are. We will not forget, and we will not forgive. That letter was short, but it spread fast. People began writing back. Soldiers, scientists, farmers, students, even children. Messages filled the system, notes of support, of sadness, of anger. The Veltrax didn't understand. They thought they had only hurt one girl, but they had touched something much bigger. They had hurt a whole people. One message came from an old soldier on Mars. He had lost his legs in a war many years ago. He said, "When I fought, I thought I was done. I thought Earth didn't need me anymore. But today, after watching Lena walk out of that chamber, I remembered why we fight. If they want to test us again, they'll have to go through all of us." In the outer rings, a group of shipbuilders who once made parts for Veltrax's ships stopped all work. They melted down the materials and built rescue pods instead. "No more weapons for liars," they said. "Only hope." Even people who didn't know Lena personally felt something change. She reminded them of their daughters, their sisters, their students. She was just one person, but her courage lit a fire across the stars. People wanted justice. They wanted truth. They wanted safety. But most of all, they wanted to make sure no one else would be tested like that again. On Station 44, where Lena had trained before joining the exchange program, her old group put up a picture of her in the main hall. Not because she had won medals, but because she had faced something terrible and refused to fall. The picture had a small quote underneath: "Even when I was scared, I stood." Back at the Veltrax capital, some of their leaders were confused. Why was this small event causing such a big problem? It was just one cadet, just one test. That's what they told themselves, but the truth was clear. They hadn't just picked any human, they had picked Lena Rowe. And Lena Rowe was connected to people who knew how to push back, not with fire but with skill, with heart, with action. They had hurt a girl, a daughter, a friend, a student, and through her they had woken a planet that had stayed quiet for too long. This wasn't just a simple event anymore. It was a spark. And sparks can become wildfires. On Earth, things began to shift. Teams formed. Plans were whispered in secret rooms. The names of those who helped build the simulation chamber were quietly added to lists. Satellites turned their eyes toward Veltrax space. Drones flew higher. Codes were tested. And deep beneath the surface of Luna Base, someone said, "It's time." But Earth was not just preparing to fight. It was preparing to show the galaxy what it truly meant to care for its people. Because that's what the Veltrax never understood. They thought humans were separate. They didn't see the web between them. They didn't see the teacher who trained her, the mother who raised her, the friend who learned with her, the uncle who protected her, the strangers who were ready to act just because she reminded them of someone they loved. They had hurt a single thread in the web. And now the whole web was moving. The Veltrax had planned everything carefully. They had chosen a weak girl in a quiet place far from home. They made sure she was alone. They made sure there were no witnesses. But what they didn't know was this: humans never walk alone. Even when far from Earth, even when surrounded by enemies, even when locked inside a mind-breaking machine, there is always someone who remembers them, always someone who waits, someone who cares. They had tried to erase her. Instead, they made her impossible to forget. The chamber had been silent, cold, empty, but the echo of her footsteps inside it was now bouncing through time, through space, through minds, and Earth had heard it loud and clear. The Veltrax coalition tried to stay calm. They told other alien groups that the chamber was just a mistake. They said the test wasn't dangerous. They claimed it was normal training. But the rest of the galaxy wasn't so sure. Many had seen the recording. Everyone could see the pain Lena Rowe went through. Everyone saw that she had been tested in a cruel way. The chamber had tried to hurt her mind, but it didn't break her. Now, others wanted answers. On Earth, the people were not waiting. They had already begun their response. It started with small actions. Nothing loud, nothing big, but each action was carefully planned. Each one sent a message. One of the first steps came from a group of human translators. These translators had worked hard to learn the Veltrax language. They helped humans and Veltrax trade and talk. But now they stopped working. Without translators, deals were delayed. Messages got mixed up. Mistakes happened. The Veltrax didn't understand why trade centers were so quiet. They didn't know that this was just the beginning. Next came the supply teams. Earth had built strong trade routes across many star systems. Some of these routes passed through Veltrax space. Before, Earth would share extra supplies, help fix satellites, or send food packages. But after what happened to Lena, they stopped. The Veltrax ships now flew alone. No help. No backup. They had to fix their own problems. In space, there are always dangers. Small problems can become big ones. A broken fuel pump, a frozen pipe, a jammed door. Without help, even the best ships can fail. The Veltrax started to lose time, energy, and trust. They still had their machines, but they didn't have Earth's quiet support anymore. The third step came from Colonel Aaron Nash, leader of Earth's outer scout ships. He had once trained with Veltrax pilots. He knew their patterns. He knew their flight paths. So when Earth told him to slow things down, he knew exactly what to do. Colonel Nash didn't fire a single shot. He didn't use missiles or lasers. Instead, he sent his scouts to fly near Veltrax patrols, not close enough to be seen as a threat, but close enough to be noticed. Every time a Veltrax ship made a move, an Earth scout ship would appear nearby, watching, waiting, silent. The message was clear: we're watching you now. The Veltrax became nervous. They sent more guards, they flew in groups, they used more energy. Their ships were always on alert. They started to wear down little by little. It was like trying to sleep with your eyes open. You could do it for a while, but not forever. Meanwhile, Dr. Elias Rowe, Lena's uncle, was not done. He had already caused trouble by disabling Veltrax listening stations. But now he had a new plan. He created a virus. Not a sickness, but a computer virus. It was quiet, smart, and hidden. He sent it through a small signal tower that Veltrax engineers had once borrowed from Earth. The tower still had human code inside. That's where the virus entered. The virus didn't destroy anything. It didn't shout or crash systems. It simply copied information. Every time a Veltrax officer wrote a report, the virus sent a copy back to Earth. Every time they scanned a ship, Earth saw it too. Slowly, Earth was learning everything: schedules, maps, weapon plans, even secret meetings. And the Veltrax never noticed. At the same time, Lin, Lena's best friend, was working on something new. She had already caused problems with Veltrax trading computers, but she wanted to do more. Remembered something Lena had once said. It was during training, when they were fixing a broken robot together. Lena said, "Sometimes the best way to fix something is to take out the part that thinks it's better than the rest." Me smiled at that memory. Then she built a drone, a small one. It looked like a repair bot. She gave it a name, Little Echo. But this drone wasn't just for fixing. It had tools to enter computer rooms. It could hide inside walls. It could record voices and copy files. Me sent Little Echo to a Veltrax research center on the moon Zareth. The center worked on new types of weapons. The Veltrax thought it was safe. But 2 days after the drone arrived, their test weapons began to fail. Shields blinked. Lasers turned off. Security doors locked at the wrong time. The workers were confused. They thought their machines were broken, but nothing was broken. The drone was just doing its job. Back on Earth, Captain Raina Holt was training her team harder than ever. She didn't speak about revenge. She didn't shout. She just gave her cadets a simple rule: be ready for anything. She showed them Lena's video. She made them watch it again and again. Then she said, "This is what a hero looks like." She didn't need a gun. She didn't need armor. She needed courage. And we are going to honor her by being stronger than ever. Her cadets trained in zero gravity. They practiced landing on dangerous planets. They learned to fix their suits while blindfolded. Some called her training too hard, but the cadets stayed. They wanted to become like Lena, quiet, brave, and strong. More small actions followed. On the planet Daler, humans built a water station to help travelers. The Veltrax used it often. But after the incident, the humans added a new rule: no entry without full trust agreements. The Veltrax refused, so the station closed its doors. Now, Veltrax pilots had to travel farther for water. They wasted time and fuel. It seemed small, but it hurt. At a science fair on Mars, young students shared ideas for better shields. One boy stood up and said, "My idea is a shield that blocks mind attacks, like the one they used on Lena." His design was simple but smart. Scientists took notes. They asked him to explain more. That boy's idea became a project, and that project became a goal. One girl's pain had sparked hundreds of new plans. Even in space schools, teachers added new lessons. "Think like Lena," they said. "When the world tries to scare you, stay calm. When the test is too hard, keep going. When you feel alone, remember who you are." The Veltrax started to notice something strange. Humans were not just angry. They were better, stronger, more united. It didn't make sense. They had tried to shame Earth. Instead, they gave Earth a reason to rise. At Veltrax meetings, leaders argued. Some said they should apologize. Others said to stay silent. A few wanted to attack, but they couldn't agree. And while they argued, Earth kept moving forward. One Earth ship flew near a Veltrax outpost and dropped a small box. Inside the box was a note. It said, "You tested one of us. Now we are testing you." Then more boxes arrived, each with a different message. Lena stood alone, but she was never alone. We do not forget. Small steps become big waves. These messages were not from one person. They came from many: soldiers, engineers, students, families, even strangers. Each one sent a piece of the story. Each one reminded the Veltrax what they had done. And each one showed that small actions can grow. Across the stars, people talked about Lena. She had faced a chamber built to break minds and walked out stronger. She didn't fight with fists or fire. She fought with will, and that made her dangerous to those who use fear. The Veltrax had tried to control the story, but the story now belonged to the people. And the small revenge had only just begun. At first, the Veltrax leaders thought everything was fine. They believed the humans were just upset. They thought Earth would send angry messages, maybe stop a few trade deals, then forget. After all, Earth was only one planet. The Veltrax ruled over 30. They had a bigger army. They had older fleets. They had spies, guards, and a council with deep power. But strange things started to happen. Small things. Things the Veltrax could not explain. A cargo ship went missing. It had left a Veltrax station full of rare minerals heading to a nearby colony. The ship never arrived. There was no explosion, no call for help. It simply vanished. The Veltrax sent search drones, but they found nothing. Then another ship went quiet. This one was a patrol cruiser that moved between planets to keep the peace. It sent a report at noon. By sunset, no one could reach it. The ship showed up a week later, floating in space. There was no damage, but the systems were off. The crew was asleep, safe but confused. None of them remembered what happened. The engineers checked the ship, but everything worked fine. Still, no one could explain it. Reports kept coming in. A listening tower went dark for 3 hours. A defense laser failed during a test. A training program reset itself over and over again. Each problem seemed small, but when placed together, it looked like a pattern. Inside the Veltrax command center, high above their capital planet, one voice started to ask hard questions. That voice belonged to Commander Cern Thal. He was not the loudest leader. He didn't sit on the High Council, but Cern Thal was smart. He studied details. He remembered faces. He had watched the video of Lena Rowe in the mind chamber 10 times. Something about it stayed with him, not just the pain she faced, but the calm way she stood up afterward. He knew what Earth was capable of. He had studied their history. He had read about the quiet years when Earth stopped fighting and started building. He had seen how Earth made strong friends in other systems. They did not take land. They shared tools and ideas. They sent doctors and teachers. People liked them, trusted them. But Cern Thal also knew this. If Earth ever felt attacked, they would not scream or threaten. They would get ready. They would make a plan, and they would win without needing to start a war. So he spoke during the morning brief. "These are not mistakes," he said. "They are signs." The room fell quiet. Other leaders looked at him, some frowning. General Mervin rolled his eyes and replied, "A few ships, a few broken systems, that's not war. That's bad luck." Cern Thal did not argue. He pressed a button and showed a screen. It had lines, numbers, and maps. "This is not bad luck," he said. "It's a pattern. Look here, see where each problem happened. They form a circle around our border with Earth. That's not chance, it's control." He showed pictures of trade stations, ports, and mining sites. Each one had stopped working for a short time, then started again. Nothing stolen, nothing destroyed. But each shutdown cost time. It made workers worried. It made trade slow. Then he showed new messages from spies in other systems. On the human-controlled moon of Delkar, A weapons sale had failed. On the space bridge between Harneys and Quill, fuel prices had jumped suddenly. And inside a neutral zone called Gray Passage, a human science ship had parked near a Veltrax cargo hold and stayed there without reason for 2 whole days. "Why are we being surrounded?" CERN asked. "Why are these things only happening to us?" No one had answers. The High Council sent a team to investigate. They didn't want to look weak, but they needed to know more. The team visited trade ports, listened to angry merchants, and checked security logs. Everywhere they went, they saw the same thing. Humans were acting normal, but everything around them worked just a little too well. Their ships didn't break. Their scanners worked faster. Their deals went smoother. It was like they were living in a world just one step ahead. Back on the Veltrax capital, strange messages began to appear. These weren't normal alerts or signals. They came in through news screens, education feeds, and even cooking channels. A recipe for Earth-style stew was suddenly interrupted by a text that read, "You hurt one of ours, we don't forget." Another channel played music, but halfway through the sound cut out. A calm voice whispered, "She survived your chamber. We survive everything." The Veltrax tried to block the messages. They changed frequencies, updated programs, even shut down parts of their network. But the messages kept returning, short, quiet, and clear. They weren't loud. They weren't violent, but they shook people's hearts. Veltrax citizens grew nervous. Was Earth planning something? Were they going to strike? In schools, teachers whispered to each other. On factory floors, workers checked their tools twice. Guards looked over their shoulders more often. The Veltrax had built their empire on control, but now that control was slipping. And Cernthal was growing more worried each day. He asked to speak to the council again. This time he brought a short video. It showed a small Earthship docking next to an old Veltrax satellite. There was no battle, no sound, just quiet lights. The Earthship stayed for 12 minutes, then left. An hour later, the satellite shut down. "We have no idea what they did," CERN said. "We can't even tell how they entered." Another council member, Lady Vary, shook her head. "Then why did they stop? Why didn't they break it?" "Because they don't need to break it," he answered. "They just need us to know they can." That was when the council began to feel something new: fear. Still, not everyone agreed. Some Veltrax leaders wanted to show strength. They began to talk about sending warships near Earth stations. Others wanted to shut down human trade completely. "Make them feel the pressure," one general said. But CERN warned against it. "They are already prepared. If we push too hard, we may start something we can't stop." Others began to see what he saw. Admiral Cheth, who had once trained human pilots, shared his worry. "They're not shouting," he said. "They're listening, watching. That's more dangerous than guns." In secret rooms, Veltrax agents ran checks on their own networks. They found back doors, small paths inside their systems that they didn't build. Some were hidden so well, it took experts days to even find them. They didn't know how Earth had placed those doors. And they didn't know how many more there were. The High Council called an emergency meeting. No press, No visitors, just the top minds in a locked room. "What do they want?" one asked. No one knew for sure. There had been no official message from Earth, no list of demands, no talks, just small signs, just quiet moves, just calm strength. That made it worse. One counselor stood and said, "We may be facing the beginning of something bigger than war. We may be facing Earth's memory." Commander Cernthal said nothing. He just stared at the screen, which still showed Lena Rowe, walking out of the simulation chamber after finishing the test that should have broken her. She hadn't run, she hadn't screamed, she had stood up. And that image had reached billions. That image had started something strong. Now the Veltrax were feeling its weight. And they were not ready. Far away from the fear spreading through the Veltrax empire, things were quiet on Earth. Cities were still busy. Schools stayed open. People walked their dogs and drank tea like always. On the outside, it looked like Earth had moved on. But behind closed doors, the truth was very different. In quiet buildings without signs, important people were gathering. These people didn't wear fancy suits or shiny badges. They wore plain clothes and serious faces. Some had once worked in labs. Others had been soldiers. A few were leaders from colonies far from Earth. They came from different places, but they all had one thing in common. They had lost someone. Every person in that secret room knew a name from the simulation chamber. They had known Lena Rowe or someone like her, a sister, a friend, a teammate, a student, a soldier, a daughter. They had not come together to talk about sadness. They had come to plan something big. The room was under the ground, hidden beneath an old building in the hills. It looked simple on the outside, but deep below the surface, it was full of powerful machines, clear maps, and quiet voices. The room didn't need many lights. The screens gave off a soft glow. No news reporters were allowed inside. No cameras, no microphones. This was not a place for showing off. This was a place for action. The people in the room didn't yell or cry. They shared facts. They asked careful questions. They made lists. They knew that revenge did not need to be loud. It only needed to be smart. One tall woman stood near the center. Her name was Admiral Cora Lane. She had gray in her hair and calm in her eyes. She had trained thousands of people to fly ships. She had written the book on battle in deep space, and she had once trained Lena Rowe. Admiral Lane raised her hand and pointed to the big screen. It showed a circle made of stars. Inside the circle were bright dots. Each one was a Veltrax station, port, or signal tower. "These are the places they use to watch the galaxy," she said. "We won't break them. We'll blind them." Next to her, a small man with glasses tapped on his pad. His name was Dr. Yell Hart. He was a science expert. He could turn metal into memory and build computers the size of ants. Dr. Hart smiled softly. "We've already started. The programs are in. They don't know." He pushed a button and a smaller screen lit up. It showed code, lines of numbers and symbols moving fast. "These codes," he said, "live in their machines now. We taught them to sleep. But when we give the signal, they'll wake up. And they'll listen to us, not the Veltrax." The group didn't cheer. They only nodded. Another person stepped forward. Her name was Tyra Moon, and she had grown up on Mars. She had lost her brother in a trade raid by the Veltrax. He had been trying to help a sick family when his ship was taken. She was quiet but sharp. Her job was to track movement, ships, goods, and money. "We've mapped their trade," Tyra said. "Every crate, every coin, every path. We don't have to fire a shot. We just have to turn the lights off, block the roads, pause the pay." One man leaned forward. He wore old armor. His name was Commander Iben. He had scars from older wars. He didn't like plans that took too long, but even he was silent now. "They wanted fear," he said. "We'll give them calm, that's worse." A voice from the back added, "They'll be stuck in a storm, and they won't even see the clouds." The plan grew with every hour. One group worked on signals, how to turn off enemy ships without touching them. Another group focused on food, how to slow their farms without hurting people. A third team studied messages, how to talk without being heard, and how to let the Veltrax know that Earth was watching every move. This wasn't a war of guns. It was a war of shadows. And Earth was ready. They had learned from the best, Lena Rowe and others like her. People who kept going even when the pain was too much. People who never gave up. People who knew how to win by being smart, not just strong. At the center of the room stood a long table. On it were photos of each person who had died in the chamber. Lena's picture was at the top. Next to it was a note in black ink. "We do not forget, we do not forgive, we do not lose." The room was filled with quiet strength. Every person there had a job. No one asked for thanks. No one asked to be seen. They just worked. Outside the secret base, the world went on. Children played. Gardens grew. Music played in parks. But far below, the real work was happening. Every time the Veltrax made a move, Earth had already guessed it. Every time they tried to spy, Earth gave them false clues. Every time they looked for weak spots, Earth showed them empty ones. The Veltrax thought they had scared Earth. But Earth had simply gone quiet, too quiet. On another screen, new data came in. A Veltrax factory had just paused. The workers were locked out of the systems. The computers said, "Error, missing path." The team smiled. They had put that message there. It meant the code had worked. A few hours later, a sensor station on a moon near the border blinked off. It stayed off for 5 minutes, then came back on. But now it was sending messages to Earth instead of the Veltrax. The trap was being set. Dr. Hart looked at his pad again. "We can turn off their fleet in under 9 seconds. Tyra checked her maps. "We can freeze trade on 4 planets without breaking a single law." Admiral Lane stood still, thinking. "We won't need weapons," she said. "They'll fall by their own hands." But not all of Earth's plans were about breaking systems. Some teams were reaching out to others. There were many species in the galaxy. Some were small. Some were poor. Some had also lost people to the Veltrax. Earth sent messages to them, not threats but help. "Do you need water?" one message asked. "Do you want medicine?" said another. "We can teach, we can build, we remember who helped us, and we protect our own." Soon other planets began to listen. A trade ship from a desert world turned away from the Veltrax and went to Earth Station instead. A group of miners on a lonely rock sent a message. "We'll share data. Just promise safety." And Earth always kept its promises. Even without guns, Earth was growing stronger. They were building a net, a web of quiet power. And in the middle of it was the memory of a young woman who stood up after being broken. The plan was almost done now. In the last part of the room, a man in a dark jacket placed small chips on a map. Each chip was a place where Earth now had quiet control. Some were ports, some were moons, a few were just rocks with listening tools. He smiled. "They won't see it coming," he whispered. The team gathered one last time before they left the room. Admiral Lane looked at them. "Do we go loud?" someone asked. She shook her head. "No, we go quiet, we go smart, we go strong." And then she looked at Lena's photo. "She finished their test in 7 minutes, Admiral Lane said. "Let's finish this in less." The group nodded. They walked out of the room, each one heading to a job, a post, a mission. No flags. No drums. Just a silent promise.